Integrity, transparency and the fight against corruption have to be part of the culture. They have to be taught as fundamental values. Good evening and welcome. It's nice to be back on Face the Nation to take you around what's happening in Sri Lanka and also overseas. Now the discussion is focused on the forensic audit report which was tabled in Parliament last week. Alarming findings. To delve deep and discuss more about the report in question, we've invited three guests to the studios this evening. Let me quickly introduce them to you. Joining us tonight on the show is Asoko Besekara, Executive Director of Transparency International Sri Lanka. Also joining us tonight on the show is Rishnupala Thendakon, Senior Banker, and also Dr. W. Vijaywada, former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Let's focus our attention on Dr. W. Vijaywada, former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Dr. Vijaywada, since 2015, the call was for a forensic audit report. And now it has been tabled. However, you don't seem to be that happy about the findings at the end of the day. What is the reason behind this?
Samir, the forensic audit study was done by the Monetary Board of the Central Bank by following a remark made by the Presidential Commission of Inquiry into the bond scam that conducting a forensic audit may be appropriate for the period prior to 2015. The reason was that there was a belief that there had been some irregularities in the bond issues during that particular period and there were agitations by many, specifically the people who were in power at that time, that a forensic audit should be conducted. So now it has been given to two leading international auditors, BDO India and also KPMG India, and selected by following a very transparent procedure by calling for international tenders and also subjecting them to a cabinet appointed tender board, and they had been given the assignment. They have come up with 5 reports and what I feel is that a lot of information relating to the bond issues from 2005 to 2016 had been unearthed by the forensic auditors. But at the same time, I have some reservations about the methodology that they have used to calculate the losses during the from 2005 to 2015 as well as from 2015 to 2016, because they had used some prices which are not existent. The prices had been assumed by them and they had been adjusted by the forensic auditors. They have calculated only the losses and they have not actually looked at the profit part of the bond transactions. So therefore there has been some anomalies in the report that they have submitted.
The forensic audit report, Dr. Vijaywada, was carried out by 2 reputed firms in India.
Yeah.
One is KPMG in India and also the BDO group.
Yeah.
So both companies are respected globally.
Well, they are all respected institutions, but of course, just like any researcher who might come up with his research findings, the methodology that they have adopted is subject to questioning and subject to dispute. Specifically, that methodology cannot stand in a court of law. I mean, when you come up with a loss figure of say 10.6 billion during the pre-2015 and 9.6 billion during 2015 and 16, the methodology that they have used is not actually a loss, because anyone else could have come up with, a different figure by using the same numbers and also but using different assumptions.
Dr. Vijaywada, very quickly, talking about the companies in question that has carried out this forensic audit in question, I want to drag you to an article which was published by Reuters, India. It says, India is pushing for a 5-year ban on Deloitte and KPMG of allegations the firms helped conceal bad loans at Infrastructure Leasing and Financial Services, a major infrastructure and finance group whose default last year triggered a credit crisis. This was dated 11th June 2019. So it comes to a question as to the integrity of this
but of
audit
course
in
that
question.
particular the banning took place after the contract was awarded in Sri Lanka to KPMG India. So at that time they were actually undertaking the particular forensic audit, and I don't think that the Sri Lankan authorities had an opportunity to take it out from them without going into a serious legal trouble.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Vijaywada. I now move my attention to Mr. Rusirapala Tennakon, a senior banker, also now a politician. Mr. Tennakon, the forensic audit in question articulates incidents from 2002 to 2019, the post-era of the central bank bond controversy, which was came to the limelight in the year 2015. However, what is alarming to note is from 2002 to 2005, the audit report does not contain information on the issuance of bonds. So an ordinary person, an average person may think the audit report in question may have been rigged or may be biased towards a particular political party in question. They were trying to conceal information. Is this a right analogy to arrive into, Mr. Tennakon?
Yeah, of the many analogies possible, this is also one way to look at it. But the fact is, according to the auditors themselves, they say that the information they wanted for the period between 2002 and 2005 are not available or were not made available to them. Audit basically is a function that is performed on the basis of information provided. Although it is called investigative auditing, they can only investigate with the information that is provided, because there is a party that engages the audit company, and that party has to provide the necessary information and the material for them to perform that task. So, but in this instance, the terms of reference covers a period starting from 2002. It is only the people who appointed the auditors know why it went down to that extent or to that period. But it has been included in the terms of reference. But at the same time, the people who gave the contract have not been able to provide the information to the auditors covering that period. So to that extent, it is an incomplete thing. I don't know for what purpose the period was included, but if it was for a period that could have been considered for comparison purposes, to find out how the subject proceeded, the matter proceeded during the previous years, or from 2002 onwards due to some reason, if they wanted to do that, that mission has failed. That objective has not been achieved. So therefore, to that extent, as you say, we have to take it with a pinch of salt.
Mr. Tennakon, what really is the issue right now is the alarming findings of the report in question. You see losses being portrayed between the year 2005 to 2015 as well. And people were of the opinion that there was a bond robbery in Sri Lanka only post 2015. But it doesn't seem so. It has been happening right throughout, isn't it?
That's what most of the people are trying to make out. But I don't think that it is the case, because the auditors, the context in which the audit was done, audit was assigned, should be looked into. Now, when the Parliament at the first COPE committee started to inquire into the bond scam, which happened in February 2015, which everybody knows in the country, there was a certain context that it was referred to, because the people who investigated or inquired into it didn't know what it was, what they were looking into. In fact, people like Dr. Vijaywada had to be called up to Parliament to tell the parliamentarians what the issue was. I think he played a very valuable role in the interest of the country, national interest. He did that role, eliminating a lot of doubts and suspicions and misunderstandings that the parliamentarians themselves had about it. In that context, it was mentioned that if you really want an analysis in the way that some people projected it at that time, it has to be only achieved through a forensic audit, because everybody wanted some legality behind the whole operation, the investigation. They wanted some action to be taken against the perpetrators. The best way of doing that is a forensic audit.
But you're still complaining about the audit that was carried out, Mr. Tennako.
Where? Who?
You're saying that you have to take it with a pinch of salt, so on and so forth.
I'm only referring to the context in which it came. But how it ended up or how it materialized is a different thing. Those are two different issues. Why it was ordered or why it was done to be performed is on those lines, because the people wanted.
Are you happy that this forensic audit report has been tabled in Parliament, yes or no?
I don't see any reason why it should have been in the first place, whether it is rightly or wrongly, whether the report was right or wrong. The necessity for it to be tabled in Parliament at this stage, I don't know.
Right, thank you very much.
I don't agree with it.
Thank you very much.
I tend to agree with the Attorney General for not tabling it in the Parliament at this moment of time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rishabal Tennako, senior banker. We now move our attention to Asoka Besekar, Executive Director of Transparency International, Sri Lanka. Asoka, people wanted a forensic audit report. Now the audit report has been tabled, and you have two individuals, Dr. Vijaywada as well as Mr. Tennako, who were very vociferous, very vocal about the central bank bond controversy since 2015, coming on the show, coming on our station, articulating what had happened, saying that this report needs to be reconsidered. This is not the report that we expected to be tabled. Alarming findings. You see the family trees of the various governors being portrayed. You start wondering what had gone wrong in the country, what has happened to the public money. There has been robberies since 2005 and not just 2015 alone. As an individual heading Transparency International, what is your opinion with regard to this forensic audit report that has been tabled now?
Well, I think on one side, when we look at the Commission of Inquiry, one of the key things for accountability is actually something which is rarely spoken of, which was 1 year ago, where there was an amendment made to the Commission of Inquiry Act, which ensured that everything that was deduced from the Commission of Inquiry is admissible in court. So that is a key element. When we start seeing the forensic audits and things, and I mean, I've had an opportunity of casting my eyes over the 5 different reports, to some degree superficially over the last few days, because there's a lot of content here. But I mean, it does shed some light on, let's say, things like the way in which EPF money has been used. I mean, interestingly, you know, and it's and I'm sure individuals like Dr. Vijaywada can shed a great deal more light here, but you know, it starts raising public questions around how investment committees of the EPF and other things operate. I mean, there was interestingly, I think many people know about the Grand Hyatt development on Gaul Road, looking at the way in which 5 billion rupees was invested into a company that was getting involved in that against the advice of the investment committee. Lots of these things now are sort of better understood now that these forensic audits are out. So I mean, I think if I'm to be very honest, I've heard Dr. Vijaywada speaking about the fact that the methodology around the computation of losses, things like that, are problematic. and I am not qualified to speak on that. However, I think there's a great deal also around process, things like that, some of which would have been captured in the commissions of inquiry, but other things which are really very clearly documented here. So I think it is positive that this sort of information is there. And maybe a final point that I'll make is I am also very much of the belief that the more information there is in the public domain, the greater the chance of accountability will be. Even with the commission of inquiry, the fact that so much happened on this was the fact that it was in the public domain, the media could cover it, all of those sorts of things are key elements in driving accountability. I will say that this is very, very technical and heavy, and so as a result it could be misconstrued and people will be may at times arrive at conclusions which may not necessarily, may be ill-advised, but still I think having this information in the public domain is very important.
Thank you very much. Ashoka Besekar, Executive Director of Transparency International Sri Lanka, voicing his opinions about the forensic audit report which was tabled in Parliament last week. I open the floor for questions from our journalists. On to my immediate left is Nadine Majid, and on to my far left is Faraz Shaukat Ali. Let's start off with Faraz.
Thank you, Shamir. Dr. Vijaywada, I'd like to put this to you. We noticed that in one of the books, there's reference to the Establishment Code of 1985 on where a public officer shall not bring members of his family into play so as to compromise his public duty. But don't you think that this is what former Governor Cabral did?
Well, in the case of a central bank, the situation is quite a little different for us because the establishment code doesn't apply to central bank officers, and we have our own ethical guidelines in the central bank where the officers, if there are some relatives who are attached to various institutions, they have to disclose it. Now here, of course, we don't know whether Governor Cabral had made this disclosure to Monetary Board about the appointment of his sister to head a development bank, HDFC.
Sorry, can I just interrupt you for 1 second there? Because you say that this doesn't apply to the central bank.
It doesn't apply.
But the people who were paid close to 300 million rupees have deemed it fit to include this in page 152 of book number 5, right? In that it says the Establishment Code of the Democratic Republic issued in 1985, and it says here that an officer shall not do anything which would bring.
Well, I think it's a wrong interpretation by the auditors because Establishment Code applies to public service.
Right.
This
again then, Doctor, is poor value in terms of the people's money, because on the other side, right at the beginning, they talk about the non-availability of information from 2002 to 2004, but not a word as to why it's not available. They just say it wasn't available, but why? They're doing a forensic audit.
Well, of course, as Mr. Sripal Tendakon had mentioned, their duty is to examine the information which had been submitted to them. If anything has not been submitted, what they can say, they can simply qualify, say that that particular information was not submitted to us.
Well, in that case, isn't it sort of half-baked?
Yeah, it's actually, I mean, every audit report is like that. I mean, if you even go through the audit reports by the Auditor General, in the opening of the report itself, he says these are the limitations of my inquiry.
Yeah.
The auditor is not supposed to go after information like a policeman. His job is to evaluate the information that has been supplied to him by his client. And if any particular information had not been supplied, what he says is, this was not supplied to me, and as a result, I am not in a position to make a comment on that. About this, the establishment code, it doesn't apply to the central bank. We have our own disciplinary code in the central bank, and I think the auditors have made a mistake by saying that the central bank has not complied with the establishment code. It doesn't apply to us. It applies to only to public service.
As other events I'm sure that we'll be discussing this evening will also demonstrate, these are not the only shortcomings in that case of these auditors. The second point is, of course, that they didn't disclose as to why this 2002 to 2004 is not there, other than to say that it wasn't available. But it's a very critical part of it, because there is now claim to say, as you pointed out this morning on Newsline, that the central bank actually did have a gazette notification that permitted the public debt department to issue direct placements
to all
primary dealers, not only to the captive funds.
Yeah.
So that's true, is it?
It's true, yes.
So therefore, the auditors have then missed a critical...
if what happens is, if that particular information had not been supplied to the auditors, then they would have used it. That's a problem. They can't go and ask for that particular information, but it's the central bank's duty to supply the auditors with a copy of the gazette notification, so that the auditors are properly informed.
In 2015, if you recall, after Newsfirst sort of exposed this on the 1st of March 2015, during that year, there was a move, there was a claim, I think it was led by Mr. Samarasiri, who was then at the central bank, that there was an attempt to sort of delete or destroy evidence, and the Prime Minister, as I suppose the Minister in charge of the subject of the central bank, ordered that the data or the files be held with the CID or the FCID. Now, do you have any information whether this was actually done?
I also know only what was in the press.
Yeah.
What has actually happened is that immediately after the report of the Presidential Commission on Bond Inquiry was released, since there was this remark by the Commission that it may be appropriate to conduct a forensic audit, government immediately decided that there should be a forensic audit.
Right.
Then there were some complaints made to the government, according to the newspaper reports I am referring to Faras. Somebody had told the government that the central bank was trying to destroy the data, information. To prevent that, central bank was actually ordered by the Prime Minister's office to hand over all the data to the SCID.
Therefore, it proves, does it not, that this data pertaining to 2002 to 2004 was very much available.
But we don't know whether those data were handed over to SCID. We have to make.
But my point is that that data was available. It wasn't destroyed.
It would have been available because the reason is we started the scriptless trading, in which we started recording the bond transactions in electronic form.
Which year was that? Sorry.
That was in 2004 we started it, and so between 2002 and 2004 they would have been in hard copies. So the hard copies, I don't know whether they had been handed over to the FCID, that we have to check. But of course I know the hard copies must be available with the central bank, and they were in the archives of the central bank.
How secure are those things then?
They are all full security, the archives, because archives is being managed by an outside party and no one have access to the archives, only the authorized officers. It's just like withdrawing your money from a bank.
Right.
There are authorized officers whose signatures have been, mandates have been lodged with the archives, and the archives people will only entertain requests signed by those authorized officers.
Faraz, with your permission, I just want to quickly ask a question from Dr. Vijaywada and then move to Mr. Tendakon and also Asoka. Dr. Vijaywada, when you read these reports in question, I'm sure you would have gone through these reports once it was tabled in Parliament. Do you in any way believe or feel that the reports in question absolves or trying to absolve Arjuna Mahendran and Arjuna Aloysius from wrongdoing
in a way,
since 2015?
in a way, the answer is yes and no. Because if you look at the report number 4, at the very beginning, the auditors say that based on the electronic evidence, evidence in the computers, laptops, and the mobile phones that had been used by these particular officers, plus the telephone conversations which they had made, the auditors have said that there was no any evidence to prove that the former governor Arjuna Mahendran had relationships with the parties concerned. So therefore, there had been some kind of a clean certificate that had been given. But at the same time, if you go to the balance part of the report, lots of evidence is there reported by the forensic auditors that there had been a nexus among the other primary dealers who had been working with perpetual treasuries, the chief officers of the perpetual treasuries and the officers of the employees provident fund, and there is lots of evidence they have presented. So therefore, the answer may be yes and no.
Right. And I want to
if
quickly move to...
if I may just add to that, I mean, just reading from report 4, I mean, it says here, I mean, looking at the transactions of the 29th of March 2016, there's substantial evidence of leakage of insider information to PTL, enabling it to, so I mean...
No, but my question is, Ashoka, unfortunately, the report does somewhat, as Dr. Vijaywada says, trying to absolve Arjuna Mahendran on this issue. However, Arjuna Mahendran, speaking to me over the phone in March 2015, clearly said that there was insider trading, and that led to all this revealing of information after that. So I'm trying to figure out why didn't the forensic audit report articulate that in the reports in question as far as Dr. Vijaywada's claim is concerned. Very quickly, Mr. Tennakoon, now 2002-2005, I want to somewhat ask you a very political question now. 2002-2005, if you look at the government in power, it was a Ranil Wickremesinghe government which was in power. So we're missing out the information between 2002 to 2005. Then you take a look at 2015 to 2019. Who was in power? It was a coalition government, again led by Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe as the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka. Can there be an instance in which the Ranil Wickremesinghe administration gave this report in question to BDO as well as KPMG India, which did not have a good track record by that time, to do the report based on the whim and fancy of the then government present? Can that happen?
Well, those are all conjectures we can...
No, can that happen? I'm just asking you a very simple question.
Anything can happen.
You can either answer by yes or no, or you can give an elaborative answer.
No, you see, judging from the events that we have seen, we have observed after the bond scam, the manner in which the then government tried to suppress the information, suppress the investigation, suppress any action being taken by continuing to keep the culprits without by offering them a lot of coverage. So when we look at all those things, anything is possible.
Right. My next question to you is, we know that there is an impending election around the corner as far as 2020 is concerned. We know there's going to be a general election. We know the reasons in which Gotabaya Rajapaksa emerged victorious at the presidential election, because of such corruption activities that took place within the government ranks, and people wanted change and people voted Gotabaya Rajapaksa to power. Do you think, having a majority right now in parliament, the UNP want to table this report in question, which they were privy to? I'm pretty sure the Prime Minister would have been privy to this information on the 8th of November 2019. Can we say that, can we draw a conclusion saying that this all was done ahead of an election to garner the much needed support to the UNP at the future election?
My own personal opinion, Shamir, is, the people who are accused of some fraudulent activities or supporting or controlling it or instigating that, they would like it very much for their action to be diluted with similar actions if they can be highlighted. Then you see the gravity of it. Oh, this has been a practice that has been continued. That's a question of, that is the impression they wanted. It's my own opinion. They wanted to give to the public.
In that case,
yes.
Mrs. Tendukar, do you think there are 3 other books to this? I'm just showing one. So do you think that this report is biased?
I am feeling like it. My personal feeling is that it doesn't serve any purpose. In fact, the information
you didn't answer my question, Mr. Tendukar.
Yes.
Do you think that this report is biased?
It appears to be a biased report. It appears to be a biased report.
So then what can the people expect to look at now? Because we have Dr. Vijaywada, we have Mr. Tendukar, we also have Faraj Shaukat Ali, who wanted a forensic audit report the last 4 years. And we now have audit report, and which you all claim that this appears to be biased. So what is the people expect to look at now?
Well, the reason why we expected the forensic audit was to confirm authentically the allegations that were leveled against the bond scam that was raised. It was not for any comparison purposes. We didn't want to compare it and dilute the effect of the scam that came out by looking at another thing that has happened similarly. That was not our intention. But that has been the intention of some people. If they can do that, provided, if possible, they would have been happy.
Mr. Risipala, you've heard of the saying that if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys, right? You've heard of that saying. So, which is why when we first promoted the cause of a forensic audit to be done by an independent outside party, we didn't envisage it going to some sort of nearby. We wanted it done by an internationally established firm who would have extensive expertise in this. And when you look at it, at the end of the day, this report, after 300 million rupees and even more, because the cost of the central bank's involvement has not been monetized, after nearly 300 million rupees of our money, the public's money, all we've ended up is with a half-baked report, where on one side they're talking about the establishment code, on another side they're talking about a notional rate of interest, they're talking about losses of 10.4 billion, which is all absolute bunkum. And therefore, Mr. Rasuddin's question to you, whether you think that this report is biased, demands a very straightforward yes or a no. And what is your stance?
No, I give my frank opinion. I feel that it is a biased report. That's my opinion only. I can't confirm and say it is a biased report. I can only express my opinion based on the factual situation.
Dr. Vijaywada, do you feel that it is a biased report?
Well, what I find is that, as I said at the beginning, there's a lot of important information which they have unearthed. But at the same time, they have made several howlers about which actually a qualified auditor might laugh. So therefore, in my opinion, it's not a biased one, but it's a kind of a, it's a childish activity. I mean, the entire report, I might say, it's a childish activity, and then later on I will explain, how it becomes childish activity. So therefore, it doesn't stand to the professional standards that we expect.
Dr. Vijaywada, notwithstanding you said that it's childish, that it is a childish activity, and that there are certain howlers there. But you also said that there is some very important information that it has unearthed. So should we be throwing the baby out with the bathwater?
No, that's why, I mean, what would have been done is, I agree with Rusiripala that instead of presenting it to Parliament, this should have been referred to a team of experts We will examine the content of the report to find out how far it can be used, whether the methodology that they have used is valid, and also what is the content of information that they have revealed that can be used for future reference.
Asoka, on that note, I'd like to pose this question to you, and in the interest of full disclosure, I must mention that I'm also a consultant working with Transparency International Sri Lanka. But TI Sri Lanka put out a statement calling for these reports to be made public. Once this was after the Attorney General had advised the Speaker against making it. Given what you're hearing from Dr. Vijaywada and Mr. Tennakoon, what do you have to say in response to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, there is a lot of, I mean, and I think this is also a relative, you know. Now, for someone like myself, I mean, for someone like Dr. Vijaywada, who is a complete insider of the central bank system, there's probably not a great deal that's illuminating. To someone like myself, I mean, you know, when I'm looking through Report 4 and I'm seeing the fact that the tender board decided not to issue treasury bonds on a particular date, and yet the public debt department still went ahead and did so. I mean, you know, there are lots of questions which sort of arise around process, things like this. Particularly, I mean, I guess on one side there's a lot of focus on treasuries, but even looking at the interesting things which are uncovered around investments of EPF funds into unlisted equities, things which we've been filing RTIs on and things even in the past. I mean, lots of different dots are also connecting by having these reports there. So,
do you feel that there's any reason to doubt the veracity or the bona fides of these forensic audits?
I mean, I think we also have to understand the frustration, you know. I mean, in a way, I mean, if you speak to anyone and you say you're spending 300 million rupees on these reports, people want some golden bullet that connects where some fly on the wall has been there when the former central bank governor speaks to his son-in-law and gives the information, and then it's a closed case. So as a result, there's some dissatisfaction, I think generally, that desire has not been met. But I think there's a political desire, and there's an opportunity for sort of technical learning and improving process. And I mean, just going through some of the recommendations, things like that, they're not incredibly detailed, so they may be obvious to people within the system. But I mean, it just highlights certain process deficiencies that exist. I mean, do we need to spend 300 million to learn that? Probably not. But I mean, these are still only a few days out as well, you know. So I mean, with time, maybe
Dr. Vijaywada, on the subject of the recommendations, I was just skimming through some of the recommendations, and with regard to the EPF, sorry, this is on the subject of the EPF. One of the recommendations that is being made is that officials at the EPF and the investment committee be given training on the markets. And basically like how to invest. I mean, you imagine that these officials should already have received that training if they're going to be holding those positions. Right?
No, I mean, what had happened was in year 2000, the Monetary Board recruited a special number of young graduates from local universities, and they were provided extensive training by the Monetary Board. I mean, all of them completed CFA examination, and they were well trained. But unfortunately for the central bank was not able to retain them. That's one problem. The second one is that all the irregularities which these particular forensic auditors have found in the EPF investments and all that, they had been highlighted by the Auditor General of Sri Lanka quite for a long period of time. It's not new information. I mean, Auditor General had already commented on the entrust affair. It had already commented on the investments in unproductive companies by EPF. It's not new information. I mean, and also the relationship between the former governor and his son-in-law, it was well established by the Presidential Commission of Inquiry.
But Dr. Vijaywada, given that, as you mentioned, that this is not new information, let's say on the entrust affair, then the interlinkages, the nexuses of big money and politics and politically exposed persons with perpetual treasuries and perpetual capital, when you look at all of that, then the next question is, if this information was out there and was available to law enforcement authorities in this country over the years, over the many years, how come there has been no accountability whatsoever?
Well, the current governance system in Sri Lanka is that the Auditor General of the Republic of Sri Lanka will have to find it out. Then he makes a recommendation to Parliament, and Parliament has appointed a special committee called the Committee on Public Enterprises to look at it. So once the COP has actually examined the report of the Auditor General, it is up to Parliament to take action, and also if it wants, it can refer it to any law enforcement agencies. So already all the information which the forensic auditors have documented in their report had been completed by the Auditor General of Sri Lanka, and it is well known to the COP. Dr.
Vijaywada, just very quickly, the National Audit Act that was introduced in 2018 gave some level of, or at least a greater level of power to the Auditor General than he had before. This issue of surcharging, and we know that at the National Audit Commission now that there are instances of surcharging that have been happening. There's not much sort of spotlight on it in terms of media coverage, but there are instances where surcharging has been happening, where public officials who are responsible for losses inflicted on the government are required to repay those losses. Does this cover the central bank?
Yeah, it covers the central bank. In fact, we don't have to go by the National Audit Commission for that purpose, nothing, because the law of Sri Lanka, if there is any loss to the government of Sri Lanka, the courts can take it over. And there is the separate legal procedure that we can follow. If there is a loss to the government of Sri Lanka, the loss can be recovered through the court procedure.
Just one final question, Dr. Vijaywada, before I yield the rest of the time to Faraz. I also noticed that in the mapping of the different persons involved in these things, one of the in the family trees, the so-called family trees, we see that there are members of the monetary board who simultaneously hold positions as directors of banks. Is this, I'm asking from a layperson point of view, is this ethical?
I don't think any member of the monetary board can function as a director of a bank.
There was Mr. Nihal Fonseca.
Not simultaneous. Because if they are, once they are appointed as the member of the monetary board, they have to actually resign from all other positions.
Yeah.
I mean, even as employees, we cannot hold the directorship or any position in a commercial bank.
Not simultaneously.
That's in the Monetary Law Act.
Dr. Vijaywada, now that you're on live TV and we've got you here, we might as well ask you the question. Have you worked out how it is that this audit firm have come to the conclusion that pre-2015 these direct placements had cost the country a loss of approximately 10.4 billion? What's the basis of that calculation?
Well, before commenting on that, Faraz, there had been some 4,000 odd direct placements placed from 2005 to 2015.
Right.
Out of those 4,000 odd direct placements, 3,000 odd direct placements have resulted in a gain for the government of Sri Lanka.
Right.
It's only about, say, 1,000 the direct placement which has resulted in a loss to the government of Sri Lanka.
Of 10.4 billion?
No, yeah, that's the amount that they have come up with.
Right.
So the audit firm has not calculated the gain to Sri Lanka out of that 3,000 odd direct placements, because it was
so it's
not,
another half-baked thing.
No, it was not a part of their mandate, because the mandate given to them by the monetary board wanted them to estimate the loss, not the profits for the government of Sri Lanka. Okay. So we have to now qualify that particular position.
Right. So what about 10.4 billion?
10.1.
Do you agree with that figure?
What happened was, these people had made the wrong mistaken the wrong conclusion that in the market there should be only one price, which is wrong. Because in the market...
Which market are you talking about
I mean
now?
this government securities market.
The secondary market.
No, government securities market or any market. I mean even the market for rice, market for coconut, you can't have a single price. The price changes from minute to minute and also from days to days, and if you look at the price today, the price is different from the price that had prevailed yesterday, and also the price which should be there tomorrow will be different from the price that we have today. But the assumption the forensic auditors had made is there should be a single price, which is wrong. Then what they have done is, based on the single price that they have assumed, they have compared the direct placement that had been placed by the central bank with various people. For that purpose, the price that they have actually used is not a price in the market, it is the quotes which the primary dealers make by announcing to central bank every morning the maximum price at which they are willing to buy and maximum price at which they are willing to sell a particular bond, which is only a quote and it is not a price.
It's just an indication.
It's an indication, but of course it helps us to find out the level of the price in the market and also the direction to which the prices are moving, whether it is going down or going up. And it helps as a benchmark for the central bank, for any other person who is operating the market to decide on the level.
So
what
do you
these
agree
people
with
have
the
done is,
10.4 million?
I'm just explaining how these people have come. They have actually defined what is known as a base price. The base price for them is those quotes that have been submitted to the central bank by primary dealers. They have increased the bid level of the quotes by 5 basis points to because they think they have said that the central bank has actually come up with the simple average of the quotes that have been submitted to the central bank. Now, if you translate it into the price level, what they have done is they have reduced the prevailing mark price, the bid price, by 5 cents.
Right.
Now, they have compared the actual price at which the direct placements have made. For example, if this particular base price is 100 and if they have placed the direct placements at a price above that, then they have said below that, then they have said there's a loss. Now this particular situation, if you use, instead of 5 basis points, if you use 15 basis points, it actually becomes a
Is it a
profit.
notional hypothetical loss or is it a real loss?
It's not actually loss.
Faraz,
There's
I
no
want
loss.
to,
Not even
Faraz,
hypothetical
can I cut in to just add one little thing to this information, because not only you, a lot of people who are talking about a loss of 10 billion, and based on what? Based on the direct placements. Please don't mix this up with anything else. Now, if you examine the portfolio that has been highlighted in this report, the total amount tenders in millions is 1,167,292 millions, the total amount involved covering this entire period from the direct placements, out of which 95.49% has been placed in captive funds. What are those captive funds? The National Savings Bank, the EPF, the ETF, NSB, Bank of Ceylon, People's Bank.
Right.
Now, the idea that is attributed by the public to this is by giving direct placements to some private parties, that they have been, as counterparties, they have been made to make undue profits. It does not apply in this case. The percentage that has been allocated to the private PDs under this period, under this system, is only 4.51%. And of the loss of 10,471 billion, the 10,471, the total loss from 2005 to 2007 is 546.848 million, and 2008 to 2015 is 9,453 million. It has been distributed and divided and found out. But there is no methodology explained in the report, as rightly pointed out by Dr. Vijaywada, as to how they specifically arrived at this loss.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lenavan. I want to quickly ask Dr. Vijaywada, who was a former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, to speak about the role of the Monetary Board very briefly. What does the Monetary Board do in this entire process?
Monetary Board is the ultimate authority. I mean, that's the corporate body which is responsible for everything which is being done within the Central Bank of Sri Lanka.
Right. Dr. Vijaywardena, how long did you serve in the Monetary Board of Sri Lanka?
I have not served the Monetary Board. I have served the Central Bank of Sri Lanka for 36 years before I retired. Yes.
Which year did you retire, Dr.
I retired in 2009.
2009. So you were part of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka when Ajit Nivard Cabral took over as the governor of the Central Bank of the country. You are a man with a lot of integrity, and you've come on the show, you've spoken about what was going on in the country and also central bank bond controversy as well, very vociferously, and you were very vocal. Dr. Vijaywardena, in your opinion, you served the Central Bank of Sri Lanka and you are privy to more information, as you say right now. It seems to me that you were privy to more information than the auditors were privy to in this period in question. Am I right?
Yes.
Coming to the conclusions.
Well, of course, auditors were there only for 3 months and I was there for 36 years.
Right. So you are privy to more information as far as the conduct of the former governor of the central bank is concerned. From 2005 to 2009, this audit report in question articulates that there were several issues with regard to the issuance of bonds. What did go wrong?
There's nothing which has gone wrong, because what we have to look at, Shamir, is that the country was actually fighting a war at that time. The whole macroeconomic conditions in the country were all unfavorable to Sri Lanka. The government did not get any foreign funding for financing its budget. In fact, the foreigners had invested, say, 70 billion Sri Lanka rupees in government securities in 2007, which suddenly came down to 2 billion rupees.
Right.
And we were not eligible to get any concessionary loans, because we had graduated from a poor country to a lower middle income country. The budget deficit has been expanding. It was about 8% in 2008-2009. Inflation rate was about 22%. Interest rates were going to go up. So in those circumstances, there is no any other option available to Monetary Board except trying to stabilize the economy. Instead of allowing the interest rates to go up, it had to completely keep the interest rate at a stable level.
So are you trying to say the actions of the former governor of the central bank?
Not the governor. I will have to say the Monetary Board at that time. I don't want to say that the Cabral is responsible or he should get the credit. It's the Monetary Board which has to take the collective responsibility for all the good work as well as for the bad work that had been done during that period. So Monetary Board's decision was, because Monetary Board at that time we had the Secretary Minister of Finance as a member. Then there were 3 others who had been appointed from outside, from the private sector, and the governor of the central bank was the chairman of the Monetary Board. So Monetary Board made a joint decision at that time that we should not allow the interest rates to go above the 20% mark.
But also the Monetary Board doesn't get involved in the micro or macro management of the operation of the central bank. Therefore, when the Monetary Board is not advised on certain matters, then they are in the dark, as we can see in several instances about the appointment of the primary dealers. For example, the appointment of perpetual treasuries as a dealer, various shortcomings in the application were mysteriously deleted in the final analysis. And nobody's ever explained, not even the 300 million rupee forensic audit has failed to disclose how come this important information was deleted. There was various shortcomings. I don't want to take up the time of the panel here, but it's page 71, 72 of this report number 5. It's there. That's one thing. The Monetary Board wouldn't have known anything about it. In the matter of entrust, there was A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, 7 points, including this most simple item, which is the the supplying of the business registration of the company was not provided. The articles of association were not provided, and yet they ended up as a primary dealer, and net result is a net loss of 11 billion rupees to the people, including, as you said this morning, central bank funds and the CEB's retirement portfolio. So how does this thing happen?
These are actually the things that the law enforcement authorities will have to take against the relevant officers.
So isn't it better in that case just to have a police investigation?
Yeah, it's a kind of a CID investigation. It's not, I mean, the auditors have not found anyone who is responsible for that. No? They have not pointed at anyone.
And then we have things like the members of the EPF, 4 of them have been trading on their own account.
Yeah, which is wrong.
Which is wrong.
Which is wrong, yes. I agree with you.
Right?
They are not supposed to do that.
Members of the EPF trading on their own account, is this something that would be covered under the Bribery Act as a corruption offence?
No. It's completely wrong, and they are not supposed to do that. And if there is evidence to suggest that they have done so, they should be immediately removed from EPF number 1, and disciplinary action should be taken against them by the central bank.
Yeah, and but
does it qualify as a corruption offence?
Question, I mean, under Section 70 of the Bribery Act, under the corruption offence, if you're using your public position to enrich yourself, I mean, that would fall within the scope of Section 70 potentially, you know. But I mean, you know, one question which I also have, and I don't have the answer to, and it may be, I'm interested to hear what Dr. Vijaywada has to say on this. You know, on the investment committee of the EPF, and I know that you had been the chair of the investment committee in the past. I'm curious to know whether, when EPF money is being invested, should the investment committee be the final arbiters of that investment, or should it?
No, in fact, it is the Monetary Board which is the custodian of the Employees Provident Fund.
Yeah.
As Mr. Faras, you know, said very correctly, Monetary Board cannot get itself involved in day-to-day investments.
Yeah.
So as a result, the Employees Provident Fund does investments on a delegated authority basis. But in order to maintain the integrity of the investments, the board has decided to appoint an investment committee chaired by the Deputy Governor of the Central Bank, and other members are all the Assistant Governor and the senior officers, and they meet every morning and before the market opens for trading, and they decide on the investments. So to feed the investment committee, there's a mid office which has to do the analysis and submit it to the investment committee. And if the investment committee does not like the report that has been submitted to the mid office, they return it back to the mid office, so that they will be asked to re-examine it. It has happened on many occasions. Once the investment committee has made a decision, that decision is submitted to the Monetary Board for approval. And if there is an urgency in making the investment before the Monetary Board meets, what is being done is we get the approval of the governor and the covering approval, and then submit it to the Monetary Board for ratification. If this particular procedure has not been followed in any year, that means there is a serious lapse in the governance structure of the Employees Provident Fund.
Dr. Vijaywada, one question, please. I think this question, if I get the answer, will separate the boys from the men for me. And that is this. Can you tell me whether pre-2015, because like everything else, this whole bond scam has become politicized. Can you tell me, pre-2015, looking at the results of the primary dealers, pre-2015 and post-2015, can you tell me whether pre-2015 primary dealers have made profits in the manner, shape and form as
not enormous profits. I mean, they were making profits, and some of the primary dealers were even making losses, like the NSB primary dealer was making losses. So, so they were not making huge profits.
Did anyone make substantial whirlwind profits like Perpetual
Not before
Treasury?
2015. It was actually a thing that had happened after 2015, and again in the case of only one primary dealer and not for the other primary dealers.
What about Entrust, the 11 billion?
No, that is actually, it's actually a fraudulent activity. They have robbed the money. It's not a profit for
Right.
us.
That's-
What
that's
has
a
happened
robbery.
is now these people in the market have given 11 billion rupees to Entrust for investment in government securities. Now they are supposed to invest that money in government securities and deliver the securities to the respective people. They got the money, they haven't invested in government securities and nobody knows where the money has gone.
That's
So
a
the
fraud.
people who had, it's a fraud. It's
That's a straightforward fraud.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, that was revealed on the forensic audit report.
No. It was revealed by the Auditor General, and before Auditor General, an internal examination done by the central bank revealed it
That was highlighted long ago.
long ago. It's not a new story. It was actually revealed in an internal examination done by the Department for Non-Bank
In
So
your
who is
mind-
responsible for it? If that's the case, who is responsible?
Ultimately, the people, actually when it came to the light, immediately the Monetary Board will have to refer it to the law enforcement agencies and arrest the people and take them before court, seize their assets and recover the money from them.
No, but who is responsible, Dr.
It is
Vijaywada?
Monetary Board. It's the Monetary Board of the Central Bank.
So Monetary Board headed by the former governor of the central bank.
Well, there were several governors and none of the governors had taken action against that, and only I think very recently it was referred to CID, and then CID made an investigation, and CID has now I think indicted the people involved in the courts now.
Mr. Tenneco, on these, you also now mentioned that this information has been around for some time. Dr. Vijaywada said there was an internal examination by the CBSL that brought it to light. Then the Auditor General had sort of confirmed it in his audit report. Why has there been no accountability on these crimes, on these frauds?
So finally, if you are referring to the bond scam,
On
that
the
came
entrust
to-
issue.
Huh?
On the entrust issue.
It has been now taken to courts now. It is being dealt with.
But now,
Yes. I mean,
many years after.
Now you take the 2015 scam. We are in 2020 today. How long has it taken? I mean, why are you isolating that incident? This is the way, people in power, if they really want to take quick action, they can do so. But if they don't want to do that also, they can do that. This part is unfortunate.
Also, this is what Rusripala is highlighting there is very interesting as well, because you see, you have the Judicate Act was amended and the special high courts were introduced with the specific purpose of fast-tracking corruption-related cases. But the indictment on Aloysius Palisena Mahendran on the bond scam, that did not go through the special high court process. That's going through the let's say the snail track, whereas some other cases have been picked. Doesn't this show sort of politicking when it comes to the selection of which cases go through the special high court and which cases go through? And do you feel that now that there's been a change in administration, that trend is going to be reversed?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the one position that we had on the Special High Court, is that the reasons why something takes the fast track needs to also be explained and justified, because whether it takes the fast track or the slow track has enormous potential consequences, and yet there are no reasons provided to the public as to why something is considered of public interest and then going through the fast track. So I mean, it is inevitably vulnerable to that, irrespective of which government is in power.
Is it
Nadeem,
reasonable
Nadeem,
to
let me-
assume that the bond
Let me
scam should have taken fast
Let
track?
me clarify one thing. You seem to have lost track of it. Can you remember the former government tried to convert that incident into a civil case by trying to amend the act?
Yeah.
You have forgotten this. They
sorry.
avoided deliberately taking this treating this as a criminal offense. They allowed Mahendran to run away from the country. Now he's absconding. This is what they deliberately did.
Asoka, it would be reasonable to assume that the bond scam should be, given the public interest and the immense scrutiny surrounding this case, it would be reasonable to assume, for any person to assume, expert or lay person to assume, that this should be a case that should take the fast track.
Absolutely.
Dr. Vijaywada, I just want to ask you this question. You were in this investment committee, but for all its so-called independence and standalone, like you say, they're not even part of the establishment code and all that business. For all that, the investment in Sri Lankan Airlines had no monetary board approval. That was one. Then there was an amount of 1,539.4 million invested in 5 banking shares. Again, apparently only with the approval of the governor and subsequently ratified by the monetary board.
They have not gone through the investment committee, number one. Number two, we had the investment policy statement of the EPF, in which we very clearly specified the investment of EPF in company shares by EPF is only for increasing the return to the members and not for owning any of the companies. So therefore it was
$500 million to Sri Lankan Airlines.
Yeah, that's right. I'm just coming to you, trying to explain your question in historical format. The investment committee therefore had decided not to invest more than 5% of the issued share capital of any company. Number two, not to invest in any company where the central bank has been the regulator, because people outside the central bank will consider it as an insider trading. And these things were introduced specifically to the investment policy statement in 1998 and in 2002. And by the time I had left the central bank and all these investments have taken place, the particular management has disregarded the limitations which had been imposed on the monetary board for investing in those companies.
The safeguards.
Safeguards.
So basically the central bank and the EPF, especially the EPF funds, was an extension of a political agenda.
I mean, the people who have decided and made the choice to invest in those companies, they must be taken for granted. I mean, they should be accountable for what
Dr.
they have done.
Vijaywada, recently the Stockbrokers Association had met with the Prime Minister, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. This was reported in the Daily FT, and they've asked for the EPF to resume investing in the Colombo Stock Exchange. Given the state of things, the information that came out through the Presidential Commission of Inquiry on the management of the EPF, information or allegations and rumors that have persisted from even before that, and given the current what you've got that's come through on the forensic audit dealing with the EPF investments in listed equities, do you think it's advisable?
No, it's not advisable, because this particular
form?
demand has been there throughout. I mean, the private sector wanted EPF monies to be invested in private sector instead of investing in the government paper. But there's a very good reason why we are investing in government paper, because government paper is considered as risk-free investments. You may be amazed to find out, though EPF is the largest fund in Sri Lanka, having an asset base of 2 trillion, its capital is 0. The way the EPF Act has been drafted in 1949, there's no capital for EPF. So if there's any loss in EPF, it has to be borne by the members, current members. So because of this reason, EPF has been very careful in investing about, say, 96% of its money in government paper, which is considered as risk-free investment. But of course, in order to provide some liquidity to private companies, it decided in 1997 to invest in private companies, but subject to the safeguards which we have introduced. Because
those safeguards have not been
followed.
They
have been changed.
Well, they haven't been. In one of the books here, it explained the investment or disastrous investment in the one thing that came to my mind. There's a special note on that here in one of these books, was the sale of the shares in the Galadari Hotel.
Exactly.
To the EPF.
Yeah,
the share was at around 40.
Yeah.
It was clearly pumped up to 65, at which point the investors exits, only later for that same investor to tell the press that he was glad to get rid of the burden. What do you mean? That's a capitalistic statement. It was all right for him, the burden on him, but what about the burden on the people's monies, the EPF?
It's completely wrong on the part of EPF to make that transaction for us, and all we have to say is that if EPF has deviated from all the safeguards that we had introduced, they are responsible.
But
Mr. Tenukon, on one hand,
these people
let me add to that. Let me add to that, Faraz.
Yeah.
Very point. In the Galadari issue, the monetary board itself had decided, justifying the reasons for investing in the Galadari hotel shares. Apart from what the person who got rid of his shares said, getting rid of his headache,
Yeah.
there was a reason adduced, justified by the monetary board. The statement is quoted here in this report.
Indeed.
It says the monetary board met and it is minuted. It says immediately after the war, there was an expectation of the tourism to go up. And this hotel was not doing well, being situated in the center of the city. Therefore, there was a very legitimate reason and a background for the monetary board to intervene in that instance, and then keeping with the trends of the country, the future trends that they assessed, go into it.
Perhaps the monetary board ought to have come and worked in the Capital Maharaja Group, because when they have a minority interest, you don't take decisions like that. Their shareholding was around 29%, and the majority shareholders would have had to take that decision, which obviously the Dubai-based family didn't do.
The concern was not to own the Galadari hotel, but to support the industry.
Yes, I understand that.
But supporting the industry.
But
Mr.
for us,
Tenukon is-
all these things had been actually highlighted by Auditor General in his annual audit of the
And
employee
unfortunately, because he wasn't even paid perhaps 10% of what
Yeah,
they've spent on
exactly.
this blessed report, what Gamini Vijaysinghe and auditors generals before and after, nobody's taken the blindest bit of notice.
Yeah.
We might as well close it all down and sell the building, or maybe support the tourism industry by having a hotel there.
Mr. Tenukon, it's a valid point that Faraz is bringing forth. You have a minority stake in a hotel, and then you go and invest money. For what reason?
No, Mr. You can't ask that question from.
Yeah, I know,
but
but
you have to ask that question from the monetary board.
yes, but
I mean, you're asking it from the wrong person.
yeah, but Mr.
I
Tenukon
was only referring to a statement that is, now we are discussing these reports.
Yeah.
Now. This report, while mentioning the fact that they have invested in the Galadari hotel shares, they have also quoted the decision of the monetary board for taking that decision. I was only quoting that.
He's just reporting.
Yeah.
He's a reporter. Don't
So,
ask-
I appreciate that.
We very often we look at the wrongdoings of public officials, and that's something that we overlook at. Now, even with the bond scam, with the mismanagement of the EPF, we look at the officials involved in making those decisions, be it the monetary board or the investment committee or the superintendent of public debt, whoever. But with these EPF investments in the stock exchange, there is another party to this as well, and there is another regulator involved here, the Securities and Exchange Commission, which is tasked with preventing insider trading, pumping and dumping schemes in the Colombo Stock Exchange, ensuring that the CSE is a level playing field. It seems that the Securities and Exchange Commission is a very eerily quiet regulator. Is this concerning to you?
It's a concern. You are correct.
yeah, I mean, certainly.
We have to agree with you.
Yeah, it is.
Why though? We saw successive, I mean, in post 2015, following the change of administration, there had been allegations that were made of pumping and dumping in the Colombo Stock Exchange. 2 SEC chairpersons were unceremoniously removed in quick succession. I believe Mr. Tilak Karunaratne, followed immediately by Ms. Sugardasa. And then Mr. Tilak Karunaratne was put back. There was talk of a new SEC Act to give the SEC more teeth. But none of this has happened. And now the stockbrokers are asking for the EPF to come and invest in the CSE again. Yeah. Shouldn't the financial or stakeholders in financial services, in these industries, the experts in regulation, shouldn't you really be pushing for the SEC to take on a more active role than it is now?
And I suspect this is, and this isn't necessarily an issue of the framework, this is more around the culture of how the regulator functions. So I think that's a key thing. But I mean, even just looking at the EPF investments in these unlisted entities, I mean, I touched on it before, but this Canville Holdings, the 5 billion rupee investment in that in 2013, and in 7 years it has given a 5 million rupee dividend, and that is all that has come from it, and that entire project has got enormously stalled. I mean, that is a large sum of money coming from the public purse, or rather from the savings of the people. And I mean, there need to be very clear answers to those questions. And I mean, and I think the important, and I think this is I think sometimes the frustration. The frustration is at the fact that there is no, irrespective of which government you have, does the actual perception on these sorts of governance practices change dramatically? Not really. And interestingly, just a few days ago, we relaunched the latest corruption perception index. And as you see, even there, since 2013 to 2019, the perceptions of public sector corruption in Sri Lanka are largely unchanged. You know, hovering between 36 and 38 points out of 100 for the last 7 years.
So that means that even in that 2015 to 2019 good governance period, there was no improvement at all.
At all. So I mean, you know, the perceptions of public sector corruption are largely unchanged. You know, and so I mean, this is not a issue of one government doing something right and one government doing something wrong. I mean, there seems to be a bit of a rut here, you know, and a stagnation, which is alarming.
Dr. Vijaywada, what can we do to ensure that these players in the private sector, in the Colombo Stock Exchange, who have essentially profiteered off the retirement money or the savings of working people, how can we ensure that they are held to account? Because they made billions through the stock exchange, through these, or millions or billions, through these pump and dump schemes. And there seems to be zero accountability. They seem to be swimming in money that they've earned from the public.
No, I mean,
I'd say.
EPF has to have this policy statement, the investment policy statement, which has to clearly spell out the limitations of the investment that it has to make with proper safeguards, and that's how you would be able to protect the poor people's money. That is why we had been, you know, resistant to this demand coming from the private sector from maybe 1996 onwards. We were actually resisting the demand for putting the money of EPF into the share market in large amounts, because we wanted to
I don't want to sound too alarmist, but page 20 of the third report has got a classic first liner. Impairment losses of 500 million rupees were recorded on the investment in Sri Lankan Airlines, and it is currently held at a nominal book value of 100 rupees.
Yeah, that is because
how many light years will it
the
take?
shares were sold back to government of Sri Lanka. That's the reason.
But can you imagine the damage it's been done to the EPF
this 100
fund?
rupees, I don't know why they have actually kept the 100 rupees as a nominal value.
They might as well chuck that in the bin too.
No.
Because it's money
what
down
had
the drain,
happened was, for us, coming from an outside, you know, request. It's not a request that had come from within the EPF department or the central bank. Outside request had come that in the national interest, EPF should put this 500 million in the share capital of the Sri Lankan Airline when it was taken over from Emirates.
Right.
Along with the EPF, People's Bank and Bank of Sri Lanka also invested.
They are in worse. They are in a worse scenario.
Yeah, I mean, it's not only the EPF, but what actually was, the message that was given to the people of Sri Lanka is that the Sri Lankan airline is now owned not by Emirates, but by the poor people of the country.
By the poor people of the country.
Yeah,
Mr. Tennecool,
Right. That's the point I wanted to make.
But of course, the Sri Lankan airline was making losses throughout, and as a result, they were not able to pay any dividend, and it became a liability. But I think
Two state banks are on the verge of collapsing because of that. They are saddled with so much of bad debts because of Sri Lanka.
I think in
Mr. Tennecool,
in
when you
2014, this was sold back to the government of Sri Lanka.
Mr. Tennecool, when you're looking at the
money to EPF and took it back, the shares.
when you're looking at the political element behind all of these things, and you realize whether it's to do with the bond scam or reforming the SEC and holding it to account and ensuring that those persons who have profiteered of EPF funds are held to account. It seems to be very difficult because, as is exposed in some of these family trees that's here and family trees that we are aware of, frankly speaking, and the connections between sort of big money and politics. Those reforms, to get those things moving, to ensure that if the SEC is not doing its job, that the chairman is brought before a committee in Parliament and held to account there. That's not really going to happen, is it? Because even through the Presidential Commission of Inquiry on the bond scam, we heard about, million rupee checks being just handed over to campaigns.
Cash by their security officers.
Cash checks, to be honest. Then you see the phone calls. I mean, we're talking about Mr. Ranjan Ramanayaka's phone calls these days, but not too long ago we were looking at Mr. Arjun Aloysius's phone calls and all of the different members of COPE that he'd been in contact with.
Nadeem,
so when you're looking at this, can you really expect any change?
I fully agree, Nadeem. We are in a very unfortunate state of affairs, facing a very unfortunate situation. We are now today talking about what the weaknesses of our investment portfolio within a 5% range of a 2,000 billion fund. The entire country should be ashamed for the state of that affairs, because if you look at Singapore, the entire Singapore, the background economic development, partly it is owed to the EPF of Singapore. What have we done? We are aggressively talking about a 5% investment here and there. There is nobody in this country to look at it that way. That is the status of our politicians. 2,000 billion just lying idling, getting paltry interest rate paid by the government. Is this what we have been talking, what we should be talking about? Absolute rubbish.
Right, gentlemen, thank you very much for your thoughts. We go in for a short commercial break. When we come back, it's a final round. Stay connected, stay with Face the Nation.
Who's that?
We will be right back.
Rise of Rock ඉරිදා රාත්‍රී 11:30ට.
Good evening, welcome to Brainbusters with Slip Season 2.
27 schools across the island, 27 selected students testing their brains to win the ultimate championship, the Brainbusters with Slit Season 2.
Brainbusters with Slip, Saturday at 6:30 p.m.
Just get ready for work, 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 work. To me, I be work, 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 work. Make it something bounce, 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 bounce. I don't need you or your brand new friends, or your bougie friends. I don't need love, you can make it dance. Like your new. If I was your boyfriend.
Vision X බදාදා රාත්‍රියේ 11ට.
Welcome back. This is Face the Nation. We start off the final round with Asoka Besekara, Executive Director of Transparency International Sri Lanka. Asoka, what can the civil rights movements do now? You have a forensic audit report out, and what would organizations like yours do now? What's next?
I mean, I think on one side, really pushing and urging for accountability based on the information that comes out, and this not through a partisan lens, but just using this information. I mean, a lot of this. I mean, the one thing that has happened also in this report is that a lot of information is consolidated together. Ensuring that there is accountability connected to it is key, and I think we're looking at a few examples of some of the problems which are well known, which are really sort of cemented. Looking at these issues around conflicts of interest. I mean, how are these disclosed? I think one of the things to also remember is that disclosure is not only about catching people out; it's about protecting people as well. Sometimes people will want to disclose interests, even looking at asset disclosures, things like that. Having these things more publicly disseminated ensures that people are also protected because otherwise every moment that one person is said to know someone else or relatives, all of these things, because no one has had the opportunity of also disclosing these conflicts through a standardized format, the assumption is always that people are abusing their power. So ensuring that those sorts of systems are also set up are key. But I mean, that is at this that's at one level, but I mean, at a completely different sort of citizen level, I mean, we've had a island-wide survey last year, first quarter of last year, which has showed that 25% of Sri Lankan citizens are happy to pay a bribe to expedite a service. We have 46% of people who were surveyed across the island, 1,300 sample, speaking about issues, saying that issues like sexual bribery are real issues that they say are often or frequently occurring in the society that they live in. So I mean, corruption has so many different angles to it. You have this high-level corruption of enrichment, white-collar enrichment, but on the other side, corruption is really rotting and really affecting our citizens in a completely different way as well. And it's very sad when you start seeing things like the EPF, which are the savings of everyone, being also used in this way. So I mean, there are many things that need to be done. Looking through these things, understanding these recommendations better, looking at the ways in which EPF investments, things like that have to be the sorts of checks and balances which we've heard from others as well have weakened. Looking at how those are strengthened are going to be key.
Thank you very much, Asoka Besekar, Executive Director of Transparency International Sri Lanka. I now move my attention to Dr. W. Vijaywada, former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. What is next from this point, Dr. Vijaywada? There was investigations, there was the Presidential Commission of Inquiry, now there is a forensic audit report that has been tabled in Parliament. What's next?
Next point, Shamir, is that definitely there is a weakening of the governance structure in the central bank. So as a result, we will have to bring the central bank within the oversight of some authority like in the Federal Reserve System in USA, where the chairman of the Federal Reserve Bank will appear before the Congress and present his plan for the next year before the Congressional Committee. Committee screens it, and at the end of the year he has to reappear before the Congressional Committee, and then he has to explain if he has not been able to attain any of the objectives, why he has failed, if he has attained his objectives, why he has been successful, and whether he wants to change his policies in the coming year. So similar arrangement has to be made in the case of Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Right now, any control of the central bank is being done through the Minister of Finance and also through COP, which is not a very effective way of controlling central bank. So my advice is that by taking into account the what has been revealed by the, I will give full credit to Auditor General of the Republic of Sri Lanka, because he had been the person who had been actually highlighting all these lapses in the past. So starting from Auditor General, then the forensic audit report, which has consolidated what Auditor General has actually presented, the central bank will have to be brought under the common governance structure of the country, so that any abuse of the power can be prevented.
Thank you very much, Dr. W. Vijaywada, the former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Mr. Rusiripala Thendakon, Senior Banker, also now a civil rights activist turned politician. Mr. Thendakon, what's now? What's going to happen now from this point onwards? We've seen a lot of sagas in Sri Lanka over the years. Recently, we saw, as Nadim pointed out, the Ranjan Ramanayaka saga. Now we are seeing the forensic audit report saga. What's next now?
Yeah. In every dark cloud, there is a silver lining. Now, I see a good side of this. Although a forensic audit has been done and certain things have come to light about take the Provident Fund for example, this is not the first time that things about the Provident Funds were revealed. There were many. Only thing is, the country is so focused politically on this issue of the central bank and the bond scam, they are paying a special attention to this report. But the country has failed all this time to put and regularize and put the Provident Fund in the right track. What is the future of the Provident Fund? What is the benefit that it can give to the beneficiaries? It is the last terminal benefit that the large majority of the workers in this country are entitled to. They draw the lump sum, that is the end of it. They become a liability to the society. There is no way forward thereafter, because it is high time now the politicians must pay their attention to the development of the Provident Fund itself, at the same time utilizing the funds of the Provident Fund for the development of the country. At least if they don't know what to do, look at countries like Singapore to what they have done.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Rusiripala Thendakon, Senior Banker. Special thanks to Asoko Besekar for joining us right on the show, and also Mr. Rusiripala Thendakon as well as Dr. W. Vijaywada, former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. They have been very vocal about the central bank bond controversy since 2015, and Dr. Vijaywada was one of our sources in which we got a lot of information from since the central bank bond controversy took place in the year 2000. Also, thank you very much, Faraz, for joining us tonight on the show, the host of Newsline as well. Faraz, tomorrow morning, any bombshells, any guests? What are we looking at tomorrow morning on the show?
Tomorrow morning, thanks to Face the Nation.